Welcome back to Derry Public Radio. Reporting from the basement of the Derry Civic Center, this is CM Alexander with the news. The final match in this year's Derry Public Library annual Dodge Book Tournament has just ended. We take you live to sports correspondent Dr. John Hellijon.
Thanks, CM. It's the return of the king as Illinois' J.R.R. Toking rides high on their third career championship. The key to the team's success seems to have been the fact that no members can legally drive under the conditions, so they must walk to every match. When I suggested, "Fly, you fools," the team dismissed the point. I think it's become a force of habit.
You're listening to Derry Public Radio. This is Derry Public Radio. Welcome back to Derry Public Radio, a bi-weekly Stephen King Book Club podcast. I'm one of your hosts, CM Alexander, alongside Joshua Kahn.
Hey, everybody.
And Benjamin Graham.
Hello, constant readers.
And today we are back with our final matchup for our March Madness episodes. And Josh, take us through those brackets or something.
Or something. I love the enthusiasm.
Yeah, bringing the energy
I love
today.
the energy. It's finals time. To recap, we have taken the second batch of 16 books that we've covered on the show. We are whittling them down to our favorite by the end of this episode because we are in semifinals and finals territory. I'm going to do a quick recap of the semifinals and then let's get into it. You guys ready?
Yeah.
All right. Our first matchup, we will have The Outsider versus Needful Things. Then we will have Christine versus The Dead Zone. Cell versus It.
Oh my gosh.
And The Gunslinger versus The Shining.
Oh,
Oh boy, can't wait.
I don't. Okay. You guys, I have a special announcement.
Yes.
I quit the podcast. So I'm not doing that. I'm
you
not
do
doing
all
the
the
Shining
editing, so I guess
versus the
we quit the
Gunslinger.
podcast also. Well, let's put it out of your minds because it's 3 rounds from now. Don't worry, it'll never come up again. Let's jump into our first matchup of the semifinals, The Outsider versus Needful Things. And to switch it up a little bit format-wise, what I want to ask you with the semifinal round, the leadoff question, is where is the book for you now versus what you remember your feelings when you first read it?
sure.
That was a convoluted way to say that because
No,
I
I
couldn't
gotcha.
figure it out.
How have your feelings changed
Yes.
over the year or however long since we've
Right.
read these books?
So who wants to start first? Either The Outsider or Needful Things?
So, Needful Things, I feel, is eternal. That it will always be one of my favorites. And The Outsider definitely had to have increased because when we first read The Outsider, we had not started the Bill Hodges trilogy. And reading Mr. Mercedes, I think definitely made me think more highly of
Interesting.
The Outsider.
It expanded that world,
Yeah.
for sure.
There's like a really cool balance in those books between being a detective story, like crime story, mystery, and the supernatural element of it.
Can I ask you guys something that just popped into my head?
Yeah.
Do either of you do this? I don't know how to say this in a non-weird way. So as you were talking, I'm, listening and also trying to think of like how have my feelings developed about these two books since we've talked about them. And I was realizing that I think about both of them a lot, like just day-to-day things happening, things that I reference to these books and I'm like picturing these images. Then I realized I do that with all Stephen King books. Do you guys do that?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
I'm not like a super crazy fan, right?
I wouldn't say I do it like every day.
Oh, yeah, me neither. How often do you do it?
I don't know, whenever circumstances come up.
Same.
I don't know how. The right amount, the appropriate,
Correct.
not weird amount.
Yeah, totally.
I don't know that I am like throwing out fun little. I don't treat Stephen King references the way I treat Mountain Goats lyrics.
Okay, I
Where
think I do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. Then I'm on the same page as you.
Okay.
It's fun.
Just a different book.
Yeah.
What reference do you find yourself making to either of these in your day-to-day life? I mean, obviously a giant jizz monster comes up every day, so The Outsider's obvious. But Needful Things, what real world thing ever like makes you think of Needful Things?
Literally anytime I am in a antique or similar shop,
Yeah.
Same.
anytime I see some old like knickknack anywhere, not even in a shop, just like there's a bar downtown in our city and it has a lot of weird shit in it. And it's just got like if Gaunt opened a bar, that would be the bar. And then other darker things that I don't like, kind of anytime something gross and weird happens, I can relate it to a Stephen King moment.
You're
in
not
any
wrong
book.
there, for sure.
I do have to admit that just literally the other day, I don't remember what I was doing. I don't know what the inciting incident of this thought was, but I did just randomly think, okay, right now, if there was a second one of me running around doing nefarious shit, when is the last time I spoke to it? When was the last time I had an actual alibi? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So you also think of George Stark a lot.
Yeah, no, it's just like suddenly I was like, if I had an El Cuco out there somewhere.
Oh,
I
yeah,
had
El Cuco, not George Stark.
Yeah.
I kind of feel like Needful Things, I don't know, if I have to compare the two, I feel like I think about the events of The Outsider a little bit more. Like my brain sort of like rests there and imagines more. And maybe that is, like you were saying, Ben, because it's part of this other trilogy. So there's more that I don't know about it in a way. It's intriguing and Needful Things is done.
It's also kind of funny because The Outsider and Needful Things are tangential sequels, essentially, because Castle Rock is the culmination of all Castle Rock stories.
Mm-hmm.
And so you get the same thing in both where you're getting references from other stories and things in there. So that's kind of neat. I never thought about it that way before. I think Needful Things, I have several different copies of Needful Things. It's one of the few books that I get just every different version of it I can get my hands on. And The Outsider, I recommend that book a lot to people too. So this is a really hard one for me. It is
hard.
Because, I think The Outsider, when we first read it, didn't know what to expect and ended up loving it. And Needful Things was my very first King book. And when we covered it on the show, I was just so happy the entire time we were covering it. It's still just one of my favorites of all time.
Should we vote?
Yeah, let's do it. CM, you've got the first vote.
Thank fucking God. This is really hard. And I have thought about this before we started recording. I've been stressing about it, actually. Thinking isn't accurate. I've been stressing about it. And while we were talking, I changed my mind several times. But if I think about which of these two very wonderful and amazing books I would be most likely to pick up again for a reread sooner rather than later, it's The Outsider.
Interesting.
So I'm going to go with The Outsider, but I'm not going to be mad with what ends up happening.
Ben?
I'm glad that we're going to make this difficult on Josh. 'Cause I have to say,
I don't think it's going to be difficult for him.
The Outsider is really good. I would be... I want to, once we go through and finish the Bill Hodges trilogy, I would really like to read The Outsider again and then the continued adventures of Holly. But Needful Things is quintessential. It is what King does best, in my opinion. The big town-wide calamity. It's so good.
I'm going to go Needful Things. Also, for almost the exact same reasons Ben stated. King does so many books. We talked about Tommyknockers being kind of a prototype for what a story like Needful Things would become, because I love when he does the whole town stuff. It fell a little flat for me with Salem's Lot, but it's a strong trek upwards for all that. And Needful Things is just the amount of Stephen King moments that exist in that one story is so many, and it's so wonderful. All right, Needful Things is advancing. Next, we have Christine versus the Dead Zone. CM, do you want to pick one and kick us off?
That's weird. Christine moved on? Huh.
Well, oh, Ben. Oh, my God. All right.
Weird. How'd it beat? What'd it beat?
Christine is like a rock and roll song. It's fun. It doesn't overstay. It's welcome. It doesn't drag to me in any way. And it gives very memorable characters that have memorable experiences.
Was this your first? Remind me if you guys remember Christine and Dead Zone, either of them first reads.
No, not for me.
First finish for
Christine.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you had read Dead
Yes.
Zone before. Okay.
Ben and I had teenage nostalgia Dead Zone,
Yeah.
which didn't hold up.
Fair enough. I see him. Since you brought that up, how does that that nostalgia? Since this is a book that was pre-show, where are you at now?
That's so hard for me. It's a little bit disappointing to read something that had been built up in your mind as just this really amazing story. And I think to give the book credit, it is the strength of these very fascinating concepts that are woven into it, whether or not it quite pulls them off the way it possibly could or I want it to. I can still get something out of that I appreciate, even if my feelings about it did kind of diminish since my first read.
Ben, where are you at now?
Well, my main thing is that while Christine I had problems with, it's not a perfect book by any stretch of the imagination. But I had strong feelings about the book.
Yeah.
Dead Zone in my mind was boring. Looking back, I'm like, I don't want to go back and revisit the Dead Zone because I think it'll just be like, okay, I get it. I get this book. Christine, even going back and rereading it, I think I would enjoy it more even if I don't really care for it all that much, just because it's a little wilder of a book.
Yeah, for sure. So I am at kind of a weird place in that of the two, if I were to give another one of these a reread right now, I think I'd pick Dead Zone. Even though I did not enjoy it for the show, I'm wondering if this is going to be one of those books that has a high return of revisiting it, knowing what's going to happen. Because we've talked about it before on the show. Sometimes it is hard for us to read. We have to read more critically than we would if we were casually reading because we know we're coming in to discuss stuff. And I'm wondering if, because I remember so many of those highlight moments from Dead Zone.
Do we?
I mean, I do, personally.
But you could be falling into the same trap Ben and I were in, because the first read through, you don't know where the fuck it's going or what's happening. And then the second time through, you've remembered these highlights and forgotten all the stuff in between that drags.
So I think what slowed me down with Dead Zone is that it was one of those books that I felt like I made too many notes about stuff that was not important.
Okay.
And so I'm wondering if I slowed myself down, which made the book drag, which impacted that feeling, or if when I've given it enough time, will it be a more enjoyable read? Because I know the next beat I'm looking forward to, and I can just see what I missed. Maybe I don't know.
I feel like I'm doing that right now with Dr. Sleep.
Yeah,
where I am letting my brain get ahead of the book.
Yeah.
Instead of just like reading the book and experiencing it for the book that it is.
Yeah.
I'm like trying to dissect every little thing and like compare and contrast every little thing. And it's kind of, I feel like I'm getting in my own way a little bit.
Yeah. But that's so hard coming up as the sequel of The Shining when that book was a book that you break down moment by moment to catch every little thing. So that has definitely a specific challenge. Anything else anybody wants to say about either of these?
No.
All right, Ben.
I can't believe it. Christine. I think it just by virtue of being a more interesting book. I think Dead Zone is a cool premise that is not used like once you know the twist of what happens with Greg Stilson, it's just that's it. I get it. Christine is like, oh, it's a crazy book about a haunted car. That's just so much more kingy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to go Christine also for sure.
I'm also going to go Christine.
All right, fantastic. Christine.
Can't believe it.
When we sat down around this table and I said, we got a new Patreon selection series pick. It's Christine. And Ben's face.
I was
and he was like,
so...
I have to finish that
I was
now?
like, fuck.
Now, flash forward. Would you, if I had back then told you, Ben, someday you're going to pick this to advance to the semifinals of a March
the Dead
Madness?
Zone.
Just in general.
Yeah.
If I had told you.
Who knows?
You will rate this high enough.
Yeah.
Man, this is the matchup everyone's excited for. Cell versus It. Let's talk about the merits of Cell, guys. What does Cell have that It doesn't?
Okay. Cell has some of the scariest moments King's ever written. It has a big shape-shifting clown. I love all the characters. Ben, Richie, Eddie. What?
That's the other one. You have it backwards.
What's Cell?
Cell's the phone one.
Oh, that was bad. That was a bad book.
Can you think of anything that Cell could have over It besides low page count?
I can think of one thing. It's the phoners themselves. This group of, this is going to give it away, why I like it, Borg-like
Yeah.
people who are evolving. And it's that I am
like a brain
legend.
Borg.
It's like that I am legend thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that part of it, setting aside literally everything else about the book, is a really, really cool idea. Because usually when you have a story like this and you have this mass of sort of like mindless killing machines, there's no character arc for them. They are just a nuisance, and then typically you find that it's actually the other humans who are a bigger threat, and you still have that in this. But the angle of them evolving is really cool to me.
I do love an apocalypse story.
Yeah, it's got that
I fucking
too.
love an apocalypse story, and it doesn't have that.
What?
It has several implied apocalypses that are attached to it, but it is not an end of the world story in and of itself.
Good villain, Harvard sweatshirt.
A very relatable villain. Very iconic.
I think I pitched either in the last episode or one of these episodes a version of Cell where it is told entirely from the phoner's perspectives.
Yeah.
And I want to read that book so badly,
Yeah.
but that's not the book.
Your idea of that unfairly makes me like the book a little bit more.
What are the advantages of It over Cell?
Literally
Do we
everything.
need to?
This is your time to punch down.
What is there to say? It is please compare and contrast this steak with a bowl of kibbles. Like, why? Everyone gets that the steak is good.
I get the first vote on this. I'm gonna go with It. Sam.
Oh, Cell all the way. It's got to be
Don't
It.
make me choose. Let's not waste the viewers. Let's not waste the listeners' time.
Yeah, nobody would fall for the fact that there'd be a reasonable discussion of these two.
Hey, I gave it a good effort.
You did. You answered the question, and it was a correct answer. But it's just a Borg versus literally everything else.
Yeah.
It's not a tough matchup. Now let's get to the one that.
Remember when that guy has a dog's head in it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was cool.
That was cool. There were no people with dog heads in Cell.
It's true.
I was gonna say this is just what turning discussing it would turn into.
Remember that one part?
Hey, remember that one part?
that one part. The matchup that I've been waiting for since we got it lined up: the Gunslinger versus the Shining.
No.
Here's just because I know the listeners want it because I want it. I want CM to lay down her argument for the Gunslinger and Ben to lay down his for the Shining. I want it so bad. Swing me.
You could have reversed that.
I could have.
I would be just as upset.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
I know.
Okay. The Gunslinger, for some reason I cannot explain in my mind, is okay. Oh boy. Oh, we're about to get crazy here. Okay, you know the turtle who has the world on his back.
Maturin.
To me, The Gunslinger is the book upon which Derry Public Radio is built.
Interesting.
I don't.
Yeah, all right.
Does that make sense at all? Like, it is our turtle, even though.
No, continue.
I don't. It's just something. I guess it's just the. And again, we talked about this before. I cannot, and I know it's unfair. I cannot separate the Gunslinger from the Dark Tower series.
Absolutely.
I'm trying really hard to. I can't. I literally cannot. So everything I'm saying is definitely taking into consideration the entire world. And it was such an important book in my life when it came into my life, and has given us just so much in the King world. I feel like it deserves just massive respect.
I know this is CM's time, but I do have to add on that, like, I understand what you are saying, because I do not believe without the Dark Tower as a whole that this podcast would exist. Because, like, I liked Stephen King, but the Dark Tower is what birthed the obsession.
Yes.
Yep.
Exact same. And that's true for other authors I really like who have a series that astounds you and breaks your heart and just opens your eyes to things that storytelling and books can do. It made me a reader. Like, I was already reading Stephen King and I was interested, but it made me a reader. That's my argument.
Perfect. Ben, The Shining.
The Shining is one of the best books ever written. It is astounding. I'm struggling because what else? Just like it's just gonna be me going over the things I said 1,000 times in our episode.
Well, I guess narrow it down. What does it have over the Gunslinger specifically?
Over the Gunslinger, it is its own story without a sequel. But like it stands alone. If we are judging these two books, these two books are going back to back. Mm-hmm. I understand, CM, that you can't separate it from the greater works, but if we should be. Is basically what I'm saying.
So hard.
Absolutely.
And taking these two books on their own, The Shining is just a better book, because you give The Gunslinger to any normal person and they're going to be like, what in the entire hell?
Or just, fun kind of Western book. Cool.
But the Shining you can give to anyone and it's going to affect them.
Only counter argument I have, and sorry, Josh, it's your turn. Say it with me, guys. The man in black fled across the desert, and the gunslinger followed.
Great. Now flip it. Ben, tell me what the Gunslinger has over The Shining. CM, you tell me what The Shining has over the Gunslinger.
You bossy fucker.
The Gunslinger is so wonderfully goddamn weird. I love... one of my favorite things, I don't know if y'all, we've talked about weird fiction on the podcast a lot, going back to talking about Annihilation. I love the genre of weird fiction. Yeah. And I think The Gunslinger is like proto weird fiction. It's a Western, it's fantasy, it's vaguely sci-fi. It is, you never know. There are demons? What?
There's a
Why? Sure.
Okay.
I'm a big well fan.
Yeah, I got it.
It's just such a strange story, which tickles me in a very specific way. I love it.
CM?
Not to repeat what Ben said, but The Shining is literally perfect. It is written beautifully. It tells a hauntingly tragic and somehow beautiful story. And I would say what it has over The Gunslinger is fantastic characters. People who are so fucking real. Every moment they have, every experience they have, even the wacky ones, everything they go through is so real and so applicable. And the messages in The Shining are so deep and complex. Like you could, and people have analyzed and just talked about it for days.
Also, The Shining, granted, we talked about it when we covered on the show, like the adaptations. Yes, the Kubrick is not a faithful adaptation, but it is a masterpiece with taking the themes and things from that and making something unimaginably great. And then we also have the miniseries adaptation, which was a more faithful, which shows that a real adaptation of it strongly could work. Sadly, we got the Dark Tower movie. But that's not important. That's neither here nor there. I think it's time to vote. CM, you're up first.
Josh, did you want to?
No, I wanted you to fight over my soul, and then the audience. We'll see if it makes it to me as a round 3. It's up to you guys, I guess, if it makes it to me.
Do I have to go first?
You do. It is your turn.
But can we change the rules so I don't?
No, we cannot. For the listeners,
I'm sorry.
I hope you leave this pause in and everybody looks at their phone, because I want the listeners to know that we just saw CM really struggle through a moment that just shows how hard this choice is.
Head in hands.
I feel like everybody, I hope if you aren't driving while you're listening to this, you should also be covering your face with your hands. It's tense.
I have never hated a moment in one of our episodes more than I hate this one, because I literally don't know what I'm going to say. I don't know which. I'm torn between like what my heart feels and what my brain knows, but also my heart also feels that. And now I'm just like, I'm not even saying things that make sense. When it comes down to it, I hate this. I'm so sorry. This is making me sick.
There's no wrong answer, CM. No one's going to be mad at you.
What's amazing is the pause. It made it sound like she was going to say something. She was going to give an answer, and then she just started saying more things.
When they weren't important. They didn't further my... Okay. I am going to regret my answer no matter what. It can't be both.
It can.
God damn it. Okay.
Can't both teams win?
Sometimes I really need to teach Sam how March Madness works.
Okay, with a very upset now stomach and my eyes welling with tears, I'm going to have to give it to the book that is simply... Shut up. I'm not doing it on purpose. I want people to know I'm trying really hard. The book that is objectively...
You're crying! You are crying!
Objectively, just one of the best books written, and it's The Shining.
Ben, what do you got?
We can still be friends.
She's
not with
talking
the gunslinger.
She's looking at the guns. The copy of the gunslinger.
Just the framed picture of Roland Deschain.
Yes. Literally.
It's right there.
That I drew. Okay.
We've never shared that on our socials. We should share that on our socials sometime.
Okay, and I can't waffle because we just gave CM so much shit. But boy howdy, See, the thing is, I don't want to rob you of your say, Josh.
I'll give my say at the end, no matter what side I come down on.
I think, okay, so the thing is...
Can we take a walk?
I need a water. I want to do the tie and make you be the one to call it, Josh. I think The Shining's the right answer, though. I have to say The Shining. I'm sorry. The Gunslinger, I will fight for this book. Anyone that says The Gunslinger is a bad book is wrong. I love it. But The Shining is, it's just one of my favorite books.
Mm-hmm.
I think the only way this argument changes 100% in the other direction is if it's The Dark Tower as a whole.
Yeah.
Of course.
Obviously.
And
that
again,
changes
like,
things.
it's so hard with...
Horrible March Madness idea series. So Dark Tower series versus...
the Bill Hodges
trilogy.
trilogy versus...
Oh, why waste everyone's time? the Dark Tower is going to win.
But I would go The Shining.
Ooh.
It's
it's by a hair.
Yeah.
But
I hated that. This was not a bit. I hated that.
I saw you physically
Have
go
you ever
through a
seen
journey.
me in more emotional turmoil?
I have not.
I was worried there would be tears. Glad you made it through. Proud of you.
Do you need to call halftime?
No, it's just.
We're going into the finals. Sorry,
What's
we were at the
do after this?
Sorry, I lied. We were at the quarterfinals. Now we're at the semifinals, and then we'll get to our finals.
Okay.
So, our first matchup in the semifinals, we have Needful Things versus Christine.
Should we just vote at this point, or
I feel like this is going to be a short episode because I agree that what more is there to discuss?
You want to? Let's just vote.
Needful Things.
Needful Things.
Christine?
Interesting.
I love that book. It's just.
Well,
it
then you
tickles
just
me.
wasted your chance to argue for it, CM. You could.
Oh,
This was
please.
your...
I was going to be able to argue against the book Ben forgot he hated. And is not your first read and favorite book of all time.
No, that's fair. That's fair.
But maybe the listeners would have been interested in your take on it.
Greasers, shitters.
I have brought shitters into my vernacular since Christine.
I use it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have to say, can we talk to someone in publishing and get the book Ben forgot he hated on the book jacket for Christine?
Oh, that'd be great.
That would be amazing. All right, let's get to this matchup. It versus The Shining. Where to even start here? I put you guys through the ringer with the last one.
You go for it.
So I'll start things off. Man, they're two titans of King books. These are the most well-known, probably the most often parodied things of Stephen King. When you think Stephen King, these are two you think of. So it's impossible. It is so massive, but it is never overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that is the biggest strength that it has over The Shining. The Shining over it has incredible characters. Don't get me wrong, but I find Jack Torrance so compelling as a character. It's so easy in other books to the very clean lines of who you root for and your protagonist and antagonist. All the time I struggled with wanting Jack Torrance's redemption arc. I wanted he was so close to making the right decision and he just missed by one so many times. And I find that so much more interesting than, while I do love the losers, having their characters completely split from child and adult. While there are some bridges with those characters, it is fundamentally two full sets of different characters in different places. And so for that reason, I think that just on the level of character, The Shining has the upper hand there.
For me, when I think about The Shining, I get like a physical feeling of kind of being alone and cold. Like the book actually makes me feel a certain way, and not many books have done that, only a few. Makes me feel like I'm at the Overlook. It's a very like almost tangible sensation. And it's because it is just so absolutely beautifully written. Like I cannot overstate that enough or describe the amount of importance I place on something just being well written. Because take Cell, for example, which is not well written in my opinion. Really cool concept, really intriguing ideas. If it had been as well written as The Shining, imagine that story.
Yeah.
When I think of that book and those characters, it makes me feel like a stormy day followed by a summer spent out in the moderately wooded area. It just gives me like this vibe of like being a kid and outside. So like oddly, they both immediately like bring to mind a physical sensation for me.
Nice.
Yeah. Comparing these two specifically, my immediate reaction was, or my immediate thought was to judge them against each other based on how scary they are, how horrifying they are. Because these two are not only the most like iconic King books, in my opinion, these two are the two books that are the most outright actually scary books.
Yes.
These two books have the most moments that make me actually want to put the book down. Like, and this is why immediately this first thought I have to throw out because even like they are both scary in very different ways. Like it is scary in the monster movie way where there's a real scary thing out there and it's gonna get you. And The Shining is scary in a more dreadful, like real life kind of way.
Even though there are ghosts, there are kind of monsters in that too. It's amazing.
Yeah. So really that's a wash. And then I was like, okay, well, which one is more fun to read? That's not really it. Cause like it is more of a, beach read. Honestly, it is more of like it makes me think CM, like you,
Summer.
Reading it on summer vacation or something.
One is summer, one is winter.
Yeah. And The Shining is not a fun read by any stretch of an imagination, but it's also such a good read that you have fun being miserable if you're a weirdo like me that likes stuff that makes you feel bad. So I kind of have to throw that out too. I don't know. I think this is harder for me than Gunslinger and The Shining.
Because the Gunslinger, it's like what it represents to us, not necessarily its own merits.
Yes, because there is a definite difference. I could just say which one is the technically better book. And I think these are both just as a standalone book. Astounding. It's, yeah. How do you choose?
For your sake, you better hope we choose because you're the third pick in this round.
Fuck. Okay, let's go. Be decisive, you two.
Okay.
Otherwise, it's going to be a long episode after all.
I've made my decision, and I can't explain why. Actually, you know what? All right, yeah. I'm going to go with it. And the reason I'm going with it is because, Ben, everything you said, very true. Of those things that are all awash because they're both incredible. But the highs of the wins in it that you get to share, the victories you get to share with the losers, help make the roller coaster of the entire book feel more fun. It's that more range, I feel like. And so yeah, I think by a hair I'm going with it. Sam?
This one is hard too. It's not emotionally devastating like the other one, but they're both very well written and very important stories and things that stick with you whether you want them to or not. For me personally, I think there are, like in it, despite all of the really awesome things, there are moments that kind of dip and drag a little bit, like imperfections that are not bad at all. Like imperfections in a book are totally fine. I cannot think of a single moment, paragraph, sentence, idea, imagery in The Shining that doesn't land perfectly. So I'm gonna have to go with The Shining.
Fuck.
Sorry, Ben.
I'm so sorry, Ben.
No, actually, CM, I think you won me. Okay. At the risk of letting the audience in on the fact that I kind of had my choice for what should win this bracket set at the beginning of the episode. This is very close. It is a hard decision, but The Shining is the more I think about it, and I think I've thought about The Shining a lot since we read it for the podcast, and even more recently since we are currently reading Dr. Sleep, and just every single time my mind wanders back to the Overlook, it is really affecting. Fuck, it's a good book. It's The Shining.
Yeah, it's a tough one, man.
This final, you are going to have to do some selling, I think, Josh, because I have a feeling I know how the voting's going to go, and you got your work cut out for you, friend.
The time has come. It is the finals. Needful Things versus The Shining. Here's the thing about what's amazing about Needful Things is that it is a journey. I've said it 1,000 times. It is the perfect set of dominoes from the very first customer that Leland Gaunt interacts with. Brian Rusk, that meeting and the Sandy Koufax card is such an amazing scene. And that one scene alone tells you the crazy journey you're going to be on. I talked about it before. I have the list of every transaction from Needful Things and what the item was, what the cost was, and what the cost was. And seeing it laid out this way it makes me want to make one of those murder boards with because it's so complex and it plays out so perfectly. You have, yes, The Shining is, no one can say The Shining isn't perfect, but it is. It is a closed set. It is a finite space here with Needful Things. All of Castle Rock is in play. All of the citizens of Castle Rock are in play, and almost every single one of them are on the board the entire book. And when you see the masterpiece, when you see the push of the first domino, and you start making the connection of every piece of this book that you have read moment by moment in the span of the last 100 pages, all come together in this knockdown one after another, leading to the destruction of one of the most iconic towns in King's world. And the amazing villain of Leland Gaunt that is just, I want to see so much more of that villain, and that mastermind style of villain is just so my wheelhouse. And that is my argument for Needful Things.
I have to take a strange tour here for a minute to go back to it, because I think it's fair because it and Needful Things are very similar in that they are this very large story with a lot of characters and very well done, and everything just sort of falls into place, Josh, like you said, with the dominoes. What Needful Things has over it is the town is much more like an active character than Derry. For me, I feel like we have more active town stuff about Derry in other works. Or maybe it's just like Derry becomes more real as a whole when you take into account multiple books, not just it. So I think the town as a character is a leg up there.
Oh, it just made me think that in it, the town is basically an antagonist, but in Needful Things, the town is a protagonist.
The thing about Needful Things, other than it being really fantastic and amazing, that doesn't work for me as well as The Shining, for example, is it is more of this, I wouldn't call it lighthearted, but in comparison, like you have these, just the whole concept of it, like the stranger coming into town, he's making people pull all of these pranks. If not done correctly, it's like this comedic circus of strange circumstances all culminating in, like you said, this like huge destruction, which doesn't quite tickle like what I want out of a story as much, despite it being good. And I'm only criticizing it for that because I have to criticize it for something, because I have to make an argument. But my vote's going to go to The Shining.
Ben?
Oh, are we voting?
Apparently.
Oh, sorry.
Well, okay. So, y'all ever read Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy?
Yeah.
Yeah. I fucking love Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. It's such a funny, like, if you haven't read Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy recently, go reread it.
I've seen the adaptations.
It's so goddamn funny. I've never read a book that makes me laugh out loud as much as Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. It's weird. It's got all kinds of sci-fi elements. It's great. And it would take, and personally, I have a deep personal love of the book. It holds a deeply special place in my heart. And it would take that level of passion and excitement for a book to get me to vote over The Shining.
I was not sure where you're going with that.
That was a roller coaster.
Yeah.
The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, I was just like trying to think. I was like trying to think of a book that I could make me, as much as we've talked it up this episode, in this moment, that would make me go, yeah, that I would pick that over The Shining. And Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy could make me think that. Needful Things is great. But I don't feel the way for the Needful Things, rather, that I do about Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, or my vote, The Shining. It's the best book we have read in 16 books. If not, yeah, it's top two. Top two.
I'm going to give my vote to Needful Things with the knowledge that I know the right decision was made.
Yes.
I messed it up because you should have voted first. And you might have had to do what I had to do, which was vote against one of my favorite books. Like the book that was my first, well, not my first, but one of my first and near and dear to my heart. But.
One of these days, you'll learn how the rotation works and you'll see how this plays out from the very beginning.
So excited.
Every single year
I vote early.
No, every single year the rotation's the same.
Every single year I don't remember the rules.
Yes, that is more accurate.
And that is it for this episode of Derry Public Radio. As always, thank you for listening. For Joshua Kahn and Benjamin
Benjamin Gams.
Try it again.
Look at them legs. You don't like Benjamin Gams? That's your burlesque name now.
Yes. Oh boy. For Joshua Kahn and Benjamin Graham, I'm CM Alexander, and we will see you next year. Hey everyone, CM Alexander here. Thank you for listening to March Madness Part 3. We hope you enjoyed it. As always, follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Derry Public Radio and Twitter at Derry Public. You can also send us an email at derrypublicradio@gmail.com. Check out our Patreon page for bonus episodes and early releases, and our Etsy store for Derry Public Radio and Stephen King merchandise. That's all for now, listeners. Goodbye.